Yes, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to GA Fan TV. Cork have just ran out 225 to 124 winners at Páirc Uí Chaoimh in the second game of the National Hurling League. Yeah, lads, of course, big win for Cork, of course. We both knew that both of these two counties both lost on their opening games in the National League, and of course, they both needed to respond, obviously, and we all know that Cork and Tipp have a massive rivalry that spans back hundreds of years in many ways, and of course that was no different, even if it is just a National League game and a very early game in the league. Very high quality. Of course, we probably didn't see the best from Tipperary, in my opinion, but nonetheless a really high quality game. And yeah, lads, I mean, what a game this was. I mean, straight away from the get-go, both counties both going at it. Of course, you had the early goal from Robbie O'Flynn, very nicely taken goal by Cork, who were driving through Tipperary's defence relatively easily at times, in my opinion. Tipperary, of course, resting a lot of players, not putting out their strongest team that they can, certainly giving a lot of players from under 20 and under 21 level, a go out there. And of course, I think that was probably what cost them. Cork were just that little bit stronger, that bit sharper, and certainly wanted a bit more. Patrick Horgan, of course, as well. He was outstanding in many ways. He always is, isn't he? I mean, all-star player last year, and of course, has the potential to lead Cork potentially to an All-Ireland title, in my opinion. Of course, Alan Cadigan as well was very nice for Cork. He chipped in with a couple of points. Robert Downey in defence, I thought was absolutely fantastic for Cork. He really prevented Tipperary on multiple times breaking through that defence, and Cork were just very sharp in midfield, offloading it to those forwards, to the likes of Alan Cadigan and Patrick Horgan, and they were ultimately the players that were making the difference. Of course, in terms of Tipperary, we know they were trying out different things. You had players like Jerome Cattle in there, who probably didn't have his best game. He's a young player, of course. Mark Keogh looked quite bright at times in midfield. He contributed a lot to what Tipperary were doing. Of course, when Tipperary were hitting points over the bar, they were coming from the likes of Jason Ford and John McGrath. Still expect to see a bit more from both of those two players, but of course it is still very early days in the National League. And yeah, of course, Liam Sheedy opting to give a lot of the young players a go. And in many ways, that did cost them, of course. Few defensive errors. That, of course, allowed Cork to get in and win the penalty towards the end of the first half. Very well dispatched, of course, by Patrick Horgan. And Cork, had control of the game in the second half. They managed the lead very well. Tipperary weren't able to get back at any point. It was only really in the last 10 to 15 minutes where Tipperary, of course, looked like they were going to get back into the game when, of course, they got themselves a penalty. But of course, before that, Tipperary did make some changes. They brought in some of their more experienced players. Seamus Callanan, of course, the player of the year last year, came off the bench. Probably didn't have too much of an impact. He didn't play in their defeat versus Limerick, so maybe match sharpness and match fitness is quite not there yet for Seamus Callanan. Of course, John O'Dwyer came on as well. Unfortunately, he did pick up a massive injury in injury time in this game, so hopefully he's all right. It was a head injury. I don't think it was too serious, but let's hope not anyway, for his sake and for everyone associated with him. But of course Tipperary did win themselves a penalty. They started to pile a bit more pressure on Cork going into the closing stages. A shot that was saved by John Collins, and Mark Keogh reached the follow-up, but he was brought down by Bill Cooper. And Tipperary, of course, getting themselves a penalty, dispatched brilliantly by the goalkeeper in Hogan. Very well taken, I've got to say. Really good penalty, really well placed. And going into those closing minutes, you saw that Tipperary would potentially pull it back. It was a 1-point game. I think the injury probably didn't help in many ways, because obviously you're losing a fantastic player in John O'Dwyer, but also the momentum as well was with Tipperary, and that long break sort of killed them in many ways. They did have chances, of course. They created chances in the closing stages. Collins was forced to make a few more saves. But in the end, Cork just had, a bit too much. A late point, of course, from Seamus Harnedy very much wrapped it up. You have to say it is still very early stages in 2020 in hurling, in football, in all sports really, in the GEA. So for Tipperary, you wouldn't be too worried. Listen, they've lost both games against Limerick and Cork, but is the National League a massive concern for Tipperary this year? Probably not, because listen, they won the All-Ireland last year. They're going to be up there or thereabouts again next year, or this year, and probably next year as well. So, of course, for Cork, listen, we know they have probably one of the best players in the country in Patrick Horgan. They just need to get the best out of all of the other players on the games that really matter as well. The likes of Alan Cadigan, of course, Seamus Harnedy. You need Robert Downey to be there in midfield, Fitzgibbons, of course, and Bill Cooper in midfield as well. So you need this Cork to show up when it matters, because of course they lost in an All-Ireland quarter-final last year against Kilkenny. In a game, in my opinion, I feel like they should have won that game. I feel like they have more quality than Kilkenny, in my opinion, at least at that current moment. Only time will tell whether they do this year or not. And of course, in previous years, they've lost All-Ireland semi-finals to the likes of Limerick and Waterford when they should have really been beating them. So only time will really tell for Cork. They definitely looked quite sharp in this game. They looked quite match fit, which is good to see. Of course, they're under new management as well. So we will have to see, of course, John Myler no longer the Cork manager. So we will have to see what happens, guys, as time goes on. But, highly impressed with both teams in many ways. Can still expect to see a lot more from Tipperary. And, of course, for Cork, they will march on now with getting their first victory of the season. And, yeah, lads, great game, of course. Great spectacle for hurling. And yeah, I think this is going to be the end of the video. If you have enjoyed this, if you have anything to say, really feel free to leave a comment, hit that like button, share this out to as many people as possible. My name is Aaron, and yeah, lads, I will catch you all next time. Good luck.